Hey everyone, DCB here. Sorry I haven't been putting any videos out for a while now, but I've been pretty slamming busy. A couple months ago I decided to sell off my vintage store and get a real working warehouse to focus on doing my restorations and fabrications full time. I've already done a few big projects in my new shop that you may have seen on my Instagram. Unfortunately, since the projects kept getting delayed due to the move and all that, I didn't have time to film the process. But now that I have everything working pretty smoothly around here, I'm gonna take that extra time and actually show you how I restore things. And I think I have just the perfect projects for that. Um, this little guy is from the hamburger patch of a 1970s McDonald's outdoor playland. And as you can see, he's in terrible condition. These were made out of a dense, expanded foam with some sort of hard coating over them, probably a urethane. But after years of bad weather and bad kids, he's really suffered some extreme damage. However, after restoring a few of these McDonald's pieces, I'm pretty confident that I can bring him back to life. So let's go out in the shop and see what we can do. To do this repair, we're going to need some Bondo body filler and some Bondo glazing putty. At the end of this video, I do a little price comparison at the different kinds of stores you can buy these at. Bondo is pretty sticky stuff, so you'll want to wear gloves. It has the consistency of a thick cake batter, but not nearly as delicious. Pour out only the amount that you can work with in a few minutes' time. That's approximately the size of a golf ball, but a really dumb golf ball that can't hold its shape. Squirt out a small line of hardener, but be mindful that the more of this that you add, the quicker the Bondo will kick in. Now take your spreader and scrape and fold the Bondo onto itself until the two elements are blended together into a consistent color. But make sure you work quickly. Now I'm going to apply the Bondo to my piece like I was frosting a cake. With this first layer, I'm not too concerned about getting the shape exact. I'm more concentrating on making sure that it gets into the deep holes and fully coating the exposed foam areas. After a few minutes, it's stiffened up enough that I'm ready to add another layer without the risk of the first layer being pulled away. Again, I'm just doing a rough layout here. My client has a second burger that she also wanted me to redo. This one's in better condition, but it has these two huge cracks on the sides. I tried to push them back into shape, but it wasn't budging at all, so I'll just have to fill in the cracks and blend them out enough so it doesn't look like two huge bulges on the side. As you can see, as the Bondo starts to cure, it becomes really stiff. It's almost like a clay or a putty for a few seconds, and you can sort of shape it with your hands and push it around. But pretty soon after this stage, it's going to become way too stiff to work with. I ended up mixing about 4 or 5 batches for these guys. You can see they're really rough, but all their spaces are filled in. Next, I'll take a rasp and start shaping him and sanding down the larger bumps. This is when you really start to get his basic shape down. Now I'll take some of my glazing putty and give him an overall layer and fill in some of the larger holes and imperfections. Glazing putty is a lot easier to sand and shape than Bondo is. Again, I'm just smearing it on like frosting and then scraping back a little bit with the edge of the blade. Bondo is a two-part chemical curing, whereas the glazing putty is just an air dry, so I set these out in the sun for a while to help speed up the drying process. The quickest, easiest, and less messy way to sand glazing putty is to do what's called a wet sanding. This is where you keep your sanding pad and the item consistently wet with water. This keeps the sanding pad from getting gunked up, as well as eliminating any dust kicking up. I'm using a medium grit sanding pad here. Make sure your sanding pad or paper is rated for wet sanding though, or else it may disintegrate in the water. Every so often I'll dunk him in a bucket of water just to get some of the residue off and see where I'm at. After everything is dry, I'm going to hit it with a few layers of Rust-Oleum filler primer. This stuff is the best, and I probably go through half a dozen cans every week. It's a thick primer that fills in all the imperfections, and you can really spray it on heavy and build up the layers. Also with the matte gray finish, it's easier to see what area still needs more attention. As you can see, there's several spots that still need some work. So now I'm going to do a second layer of the glazing putty. I'll do a thick spread with the side of the spreader and then scrape back with the edge. Again, another wet sanding to help smooth this all out. It's a multi-step process of glazing putty and primer over and over again until you get everything smooth and perfect. Now I'm doing a third layer of glazing putty, and as you can see, there's less and less space that needs my attention. He's starting to look pretty good now. I'll do a fourth and final putty layer just to get those last few nicks and holes filled in. This is typically about how many steps I do on something like this. About 4 or 5 layers of putty and primer, back and forth, back and forth. I didn't film the spraying of the final primal layer, but you get the idea. The burgers are now smooth enough that I'm ready to give them their first layer of paint. I'm using Omni MBC automotive paints in my HVLP spray gun. You're going to want to run your paint through a filter to make sure there are no chunks in it and that it's thin enough to go through your spray gun. I also add a 1-to-1 ratio of urethane grade reducer. So I'm going to start out with 1 ounce of each and see where that gets me. I was initially pretty intimidated by using spray guns, but after doing it for a couple years now, I really prefer using them over rattle cans. You can adjust the way the spray pattern comes out by turning the front tip. If the tip is going vertically, the spray pattern will be horizontal, and vice versa. For this, I'm going to set it to a horizontal spray. I'm also dialing in the pressure to about 40 psi. Initially, I do a light coat just to get some paint on. It dries quickly, so I'm able to do several more layers on top of this in a short amount of time. The downside to using a spray gun, of course, is that it has to be cleaned out after each use. This isn't too bad though. I just splash a little bit of lacquer thinner in it and swish it around and just spray it into a rag. I then use that wet rag to give the gun a good wipe down. It's not too bad, and the finished result is far superior to spray cans, so it's all worthwhile. For the tan color, I'm using some more of the Omni Automotive paints. Originally, I tried to run it through my airbrush, but I don't know, it was just too thick and it didn't work really well, so I abandoned that idea pretty quickly, and I instead used my smaller HVLP spray gun. The spray pattern was a little larger than I would have liked for something this size, but it worked out okay. I just gently and carefully sprayed lightly around the edges, making sure to leave just a little bit of yellow, and then went a little heavier along the top and the bottom of the burgers. Now I'm going to paint the actual burger with a brush, and I'm just going to use a Rust-Oleum leather brown right out of the can for this. I forgot to paint the pickle first, so I'm going to stop and do that real quick. The only green enamel paint I have on hand is this can of spray paint. I don't really want to spend the time to mask it off and spray it, so here's a little trick. Grab yourself a disposable cup and just give it a few squirts into it, and it'll puddle up and become a paint that you can just brush on. Now I'm back to the burger. I'm not being too careful about making sure that it's completely covered. I kind of like a little bit of yellow showing through a bit. For the eyes, I'm also using just a Rust-Oleum enamel right out of the can. For the inner part of the pickle, I'm using some more spray paint in a cup. This time it's a lime green Rust-Oleum. To mark where his pupils are, I grabbed this scrap piece of metal tubing that I had and just kind of rolled it into the thick white paint to indicate where I need to paint the black. It wasn't really the best idea, but it worked out okay. Again, I'm just using some Rust-Oleum enamel right out of the can. Time to paint the pickle seeds. Now comes my favorite part, when it all comes together. This is an industrial grade high gloss automotive clear by Omni. It's item number MC270. I'm using it with a medium set hardener. They also make a quick and a slow set, but I find the medium works best for me. This is a 4:1 ratio, so I'm going to try 4 ounces first to see where that gets me. I have a dedicated gun that I specifically use only for clear. This helps to make sure that there's no hidden old paint left over in the gun that ends up squirting onto your final surface, because I've had that happen before. So first I'm going to do a light layer just to get the surface ready, and then I'm going to do a thick wet on wet layer to help really build up that gloss. It's a tricky balancing act between getting a lot on there but not so much that it starts to drip. After doing this a few times, I'm really starting to get the hang of it though. Look how amazingly shiny that surface is. It's also a very protective layer that'll keep him safe from the elements for years to come. And here they are with the rest of their happy Burger Patch family. Here's a little bonus video I put together showing the huge variety of prices out there for Bondo. My first stop was Menards, which is a chain of home improvement stores here in the Midwest, similar to a Lowe's or Home Depot. Their can of Bondo in the 1 3/4 pound size was $7.97, and the 4.5 ounce tube of Glazing Putty was $3.17, but they were temporarily out of stock of that. My next stop was AutoZone. Their can of Bondo was $19.99, over double the price of Menards, and their Glazing Putty was $11, which is like triple the price. Advance Auto Parts closes early due to lack of employees or something. O'Reilly Auto Parts had the exact same prices as AutoZone. Ace Hardware is great. I love shopping here for the hard to find stuff. They were pretty much right in the middle of Menards and the auto stores for pricing. Their Bondo was $14.99 for the can, and the putty was $6.97. But they had a parking lot duck, so they win. My last stop was Home Depot. Their Bondo was $8.32, but I couldn't find any Glazing Putty here. For fun, I thought I'd check out Amazon's prices. Their Glazing Putty was about the same as the auto stores, but their Bondo was only sold by third-party sellers, and they were all over the place in price. So that's what I know, and now you know too.